This is Home Inspection 101. Just in general, list some things a home inspector does look at. I'm not going to list go over all of these items, but we'll go over the main categories: the site, of course, the exterior, the structure, the garage or parking areas, the attics, the roofs, the plumbing, the electrical, HVAC, which is heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, the kitchen, the bathrooms, and the interior. That is, in a nutshell, what everybody looks at as far as home inspection is concerned, and it's about 500 items per house that we're looking at, depending on the house. Now, with that being said, let's do the flip side. What do they not look at? Right off the bat, home inspectors, because sometimes we'll get a call and they'll say, hey, I'm concerned about this, and it's really an item that we don't even look at. So I have to explain to them what our standards are, and that whether they hire us or another home inspection company, they're not going to be looking at it either. So you're kind of comparing apples to apples. What would some of those items be?
Mine never looked at the chimney when I asked them to, so I'm going to go with the chimney.
What part of the chimney?
The chimney cap. Said it doesn't get on roofs, so I assume that's the same thing.
Okay. To answer that question, Greg, or it's not even a question, a statement, a home inspector does not have to get onto a roof. They do not, okay? The best way to look at a roof is how? On the roof, okay? But there are home inspectors that may be afraid of heights, they may be overweight, maybe snowy, maybe slippery, rainy, I understand all that. But a chimney cap is something we should look at. Unless you don't go on a roof, then you have to define in your report that you could not look at the chimney because of minimal access. But in standard-wise, a chimney is part of an inspection. The only part is not part of an inspection of a chimney is the flue. That's why I asked what part. The internal components of the chimney. We do like a phase one inspection, which is a visual. We go into the fireplace, we look up, and if we're on the roof and we can look down, we look down. We don't run a camera down it or anything like that. It is recommended, and I would probably do this if I bought a house that had a natural fireplace, to have a phase two done, is where they actually run a camera, because you want to look for cracks and gaps in the flue, which are expensive to repair. But per standards, let's go back to that, a home inspector does not have to look at chimney flues, okay? It's because they're inaccessible, that's why. So that's a great point. Thanks, Greg.
Question?
Yes.
About the chimney. I've seen some inspectors send up like drones. Is that sort of a new thing for them, or is that going to be a new standard?
No, there's no standard to have to use a drone. It's just another tool a home inspector can use to benefit the client and everyone involved. But an inspector does not have to use a drone.
Okay, I just didn't know if they were, just the liability of going up there, like you said, was, people were going away with that for falls or for any reason.
No, drones are becoming more and more popular. And let me stop or talk about this for 1 second. It also depends on where your house is. If your house is near the airport, your drone is not going to lift off the ground because of the airport. Okay? So it also depends on where you are. These drones have this technology built in them where if it's near an airport, you will not be able to even lift it off the ground. So again, drone is not something they have to use. It's just another tool that your home inspector can use if they're trained to use it. Okay? And that we'll talk a little bit about that too with not all home inspectors are created equal. Because when I make this presentation, this is not about me. This is not about home sites. This is about you out there in the field with inspectors in general, okay? So a couple other things we don't look at. We don't look at low voltage wiring systems such as intercoms, doorbells, lawn lights, cable. Some people ask, hey, I want to make sure the cable works, or I want to make sure there's cable connections in each room. That is not something a home inspector is going to do, okay? Or phone for that reason, because that's all low voltage wiring. Appliances. Home inspectors do not have to look at appliances. Most home inspectors do, or they select which ones they want to. The ones that usually are included in an inspection, regardless, are built-in appliances because it's usually part of the home. Home site in general, we operate them as a courtesy only, and we do it as a limited inspection, which means we're not baking a cake in the oven and making sure the temperature is accurate. We just want to make sure things turn on and off when we do operate them. It's just as a courtesy. Outbuildings are something we don't normally look at unless the client wants us to look at it, and then that would be an additional charge. But per standards, outbuildings, and I'm not talking about garages, okay? I'm talking about somebody has a big shed in the backyard or something like that. Usually garages are included, or maybe another example would be a boathouse. Those are usually not included unless the client pays extra for that. Pools, hot tubs, associated equipment, not part of an inspection, but there are inspectors that do or have the training to do that, so it all depends on who you select as a home inspector. Recreational equipment, saunas, steam rooms, you get into the high-end houses, they do have this type of equipment, and anything that's recreational, a home inspector does not have to look at. Again, higher-end homes have underground lawn sprinklers or irrigation systems. Those are not part of an inspection. Again, there are some home inspectors that do test them, but it all depends on who you select as a home inspection company. And then being in Wisconsin, I mean, you're not going to test it in winter, so it kind of limits things. Here's the one item that some people have concerns about, and I have to tell them it's not something we do, is water softeners. We may acknowledge if they're hooked up or not, but there's really no way to tell if something is being softened properly. So water softeners and the equipment, proper operation of those items are not part of an inspection. HRVs or ERVs, you may not know what that is. Those are heat recovery ventilators or energy recovery ventilators. Those are in high-end homes as well to provide proper air exchange in a home. You may have, for example, a house that has condensation on the windows in winter. This type of equipment would help that condensation from developing. Septic tanks, not part of an inspection. There are people that do sewer scopes, some companies. We would then inspect the lateral to the septic tank, but the septic system itself is not part of an inspection. Wells are buried usually. Those are not part of an inspection. However, a home inspector will operate the components in the basement, such as a pressure tank, and they'll verify that the pump is coming on and off as it should. But to actually do water testing and to ensure the well is running properly, that's something home inspectors do not do. Radon systems, sometimes a house has a radon mitigation system in. This is something that, again, we do not inspect. It's beyond the scope of a home inspection. However, I've been on inspections where I know they're installed wrong, and I may kind of blink and say, hey, this is something that we won't have on the inspection report, but you may want to have somebody come in and look at this system because I believe it's installed improperly. Fire alarms, fire extinguishers, that comes in usually when you have multifamilies, not inspected. And EIFS, does anybody know what EIFS is? Exterior insulation finishing systems. Okay, that's in high-end homes, very high-end homes, even commercial properties. If you were to go to a Walmart and go to the exterior and look at the siding, that is a product called EIFS, most likely. It's basically synthetic stucco. You may remember stucco, you knock on it, it kind of feels like a concrete. EIFS, if you knock on it, it's hollow, okay? This is a product that has been known to have moisture issues. And the only way to tell if there are moisture issues with this product is to do some invasive testing. And that is beyond what a home inspector can do, unless, of course, they're trained to do it. But it is an invasive testing which may damage things. So if you have a house that has this product, a home inspector will most likely recommend a third party review it before closing. Furnace heat exchangers, not part of home inspection simply because they're not accessible, the same as the chimney flues. We can't see a heat exchanger crack, especially in the newer furnaces. Now, I've seen many cracks in heat exchangers, but they're usually in the older 20-plus-year-old furnaces that have a little bit more access. But even looking at it, you're looking at 5% of it. It usually has to have a pressure test to see if there's cracks. Pests, mice, things like that, not part of an inspection unless you were to order a wood-destroying organism inspection, which is different than a pest inspection, because a pest inspection is looking for pests in general, not part of an inspection. A wood-destroying organism inspection, or as some people call it, a termite inspection, looks for a few things. We look for termites, we look for powder post beetles, we look for carpenter ants, and carpenter bees. These are things that actually can damage wood and affect the structure of your home. Not usually a big issue in this part of the country. However, last year, the VA has mandated that every VA loan have a WDO inspection. So some inspectors don't do that, and you have to be careful who you select for that, because some do, some don't. And then mold. Mold is not part of an inspection. We may acknowledge it in the report as being a possible mold substance, but to do a mold inspection, there's different certifications involved, and it's usually something that is not part of a home inspection. Any questions on that?
Dave, do you do the DWO inspections? And if so, how much is that? Like, what's that extra inspection cost?
We do WDO inspections, and the fee is usually $175. But if we do the inspection, I'm a vet, so this is a vet-owned company. We do the WDO for free if we do the inspection.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Additional information about home inspectors. Let's talk about what they do and how to compare them, or not necessarily compare inspector to inspector, but just in general what an inspector is and what it's not. They're generalists, okay? So a lot of times a home inspector will be on site and call something out, and people might get upset about it. Homeowners might get upset about it for some reason or another. I had this done by a professional. There's no way this is wrong. Please keep in mind, an inspector is not an end-all, be-all. We're generalists, okay? If a home inspector calls something out and you disagree, you get a contractor in there to justify that it's fine, and the point is moot, okay? They're not the end-all, be-all. It's just another door you're going to have to open to handle the situation. So I compare myself to, like, and other home inspectors, to like a general practitioner. A doctor. You go to a doctor, he looks you over. If something's concerning, they may recommend you see a specialist. Okay, so maybe if you have some sort of blood test done and there's possible cancer cells and they refer you to a cancer specialist, that person will decide if there's a concern or not. And if there's no concern, you don't go back to your original doctor and get upset for referring you to this doctor because you spent all this money on going an extra step. That doesn't happen in the medical industry, and it shouldn't happen in the home inspection industry because home inspectors are generalists. That's it. A contractor can trump them. An engineer, of course, can trump them. So keep that in mind. Visual inspection only, okay? This is very important because a lot of times things get forgotten in the fact that home inspectors will not turn things on that are turned off, okay? Like, for instance, in summer, a lot of people turn the gas valve off on their gas fireplace, and a home inspector will not turn that on to verify it's working because they don't know why it's turned off. So keep that in mind if you're counseling a seller, let them know that these valves should be turned on so full access and operation can be performed. Home inspectors will not move furniture or storage. Depending on the inspector, I mean, I've moved much storage in the past, probably more than I could or should. But also, if there's a lot of storage covering an access area, say for instance an attic, if you can't go somewhere, the client really has some problems with you not going there. They think automatically something is wrong because we can't inspect it. So take that doubt out of the client and just have the house, tell the seller to remove the storage so that we can get to those areas. And that's not an issue then. As soon as there's an area we cannot go to, it really concerns the client, so to speak. It's a snapshot in time, okay? You've all heard of PDFs, right? The PDF file, well, that's what a home inspection is. It's a PDF file for that specific time that we're doing the inspection. The specific weather conditions, everything. We cannot confirm past history, nor can we dictate what's going to happen in the future. So it's what we can see that day. There's no destructive testing, and we do not have x-ray eyes, which means we can't see behind paneling, we can't see behind furniture, can't see behind drywall, and we're not going to cut holes to do our inspection. So basically, a visual inspection only. Other tests that may be performed by a home inspector usually need authorization in the offer to purchase: radon, air or mold sampling, asbestos testing, lead testing. Those are things are considered testing. Other things that are included with inspections, sewer scopes or termite inspections, WDO. Those are things that usually do not need authorization and are just additional tests that the home buyer can perform. Inspection lasts 2 to 3 hours. You'd be surprised how many times the seller, the buyer, they have no idea how long the inspections take. And the inspector does arrive early. That's good information for the seller because they arrive how early? Any idea?
Half an hour.
Half an hour is the sweet spot. Thank you. That is the sweet spot. Any idea why they do that?
Get a scope on everything outside.
Well, they do it for a couple reasons. They try, you have a client or somebody usually following you your entire inspection. And if you ask an inspector, their favorite inspection is probably when no one's there, okay, because they can really digest the house. But then that really robs the experience of the client. So by doing the exterior before anybody gets there, we can kind of get a jump on things and really digest what's happening with nobody looking over our shoulder. And when the client arrives, we can start immediately. We can discuss what we found on the outside as opposed to waiting another half hour till we digest what's going on with the home. So that's the reason. There's different kinds of reports out there. Obviously, computer report is the predominant report. There are a few companies that do written reports yet. Those are the old school people. Been doing home inspections for a long time and just don't want to go to computer. Very hard to fax, very hard to send copies of, but there are some companies out there that still do them. And fast turnaround is a must. Inspectors are very aware of that. If it's not the same day, it's maybe even on site. Our guys personally on site, we get a lot of the inspection report done on site, but we like to digest it and make sure it's completely detailed before we send it out. So it's usually the same day or at worst case scenario within 24 hours. Now this is interesting. The national average, I don't know if you knew this because most home inspectors, I should say most agents, their clients would ask them how much a home inspection is. And I've heard agents have prices all over the board. Some of them say 200, some of them say 500, some of them say 300. The national average per the USA Today, and this is in 2006, is $380. And there are inspectors that will do it for that price as well now, which means home inspectors haven't gotten a raise in all that time. Home inspection prices have not gone up. And if you ask our insurance companies, they tell us that we should be charging at least $1,000 for an inspection with all the liability we take per doing the inspection. Keep that in mind when selecting a home inspector. If it's too low, there's a reason, okay? And you have to compare apples to apples. A lot of people call us, and the first thing out of their mouth is, how much is the inspection? And that's really the wrong question. The question is, how long have you been in business? How many inspections have you performed? Price is according to that. So I know I can find an inspector today to do an inspection that we would charge $400 on, where somebody else would charge $200 on. And again, there's a reason for that. So buyer beware if the home inspection is too low. Any questions? All right. What not to expect on a home inspection? A home inspection is not an insurance policy, okay? If something goes wrong, it's not a home inspector's fault. They're not going to perform repairs. If something's wrong, broken, I'm not going to go in there and just say, I'll fix this real quick. Not part of what we do. No home inspector has to offer a warranty or guarantee of any kind. There are some companies that provide warranties. We are actually one of them. A home inspector does not troubleshoot systems. So for instance, if I go to the thermostat of a furnace and turn it on and it doesn't go on, I'm going to check for a couple things to make sure that it's not really simple, but it's not our job to break down the system and find out what's happening. It's for somebody else to come in and look at and evaluate. Home inspectors will not give you repair suggestions. Some people come in and say, hey, I want to tear down this wall. Is it possible to do that? And those are questions we don't like answering because it's not part of our job. Believe me, we entertain the questions. We try to coach people as well as we can, but it's really not part of a home inspection. The next one is something that most people are surprised about. It's not a code compliant inspection. Okay, no home inspector should be going in there and talking about, hey, this is in violation of COM 398. You know, none of that quoting of code should be in the report. It shouldn't even be talked about. It's not a code compliant inspection. However, we are familiar with code. We do use codes, but we don't disguise it in the report as being a code violation. If we see something that may be a code compliant issue, we may say it's, it should be evaluated by a professional. It may show do-yourself installation tactics, so to speak. But a home inspection is not a code-compliant inspection. Home inspector will not give you repair or replacement costs. That's a question that gets asked quite often on site. Say, for instance, a roof is at its life expectancy, and the next question is naturally, well, how much is that roof going to cost? And no matter what figure the home inspector gives you, you're probably going to be disappointed later for the simple fact that it all depends when you're going to do this roof. Are you going to do it in winter, fall, spring, summer? Are you going to use a really reputable company? Are you going to use somebody who does it on the side? What type of shingles are you going to use? Are you going to use ice and water shield? Are you going to replace flashings? All this comes into play. And of course, changes the price of the roof. That's why repair price, replacement estimates are not part of an inspection. We do, however, home site have a service where you can actually submit the report to a third-party company, and they will give you a cost estimate report. And they do that within 24 hours if you really need it. Home inspectors are not looking for $200 issues. So cosmetics, carpet, things like that, not part of a home inspection. And we're not going to do any permit searching. Even though in our inspections, we do provide a national build facts report with all inspections. You've heard of Carfax? Well, this is build facts. So it's something that we add as a home inspection company, but most home inspection companies do not do it. We cannot predict future conditions, so if something is not leaking one day, it may leak another day. Like, for instance, a skylight. Skylights essentially can leak anytime. If you have an insurance, if you have a home warranty company or a home warranty policy with your new home, they won't even cover skylights because they know skylights can leak anytime. So therefore, if there's stains, no stains that day, we can't predict if it's going to leak tomorrow or 5 years down the road. It's always something to monitor. That's just an example. We cannot verify past conditions. So if somebody says, hey, we get on the property condition report, we have reports of leaks in the southeast corner of the basement on heavy rains. It's good information to know, but we can't verify that that actually happened or how it happened or anything like that. And then again, efficiency inspection or energy audit. It's not an energy audit. So we're not going to tell you the house is low on efficiency or low on, the energy will escape from the house because of a lack of insulation. We do, however, report on the insulation, but keep in mind it's not an energy audit. All right, questions?
Yeah, I have a question on how you guys address like concerns regarding like winter inspections as far as like roof, sloping, grading, things like that that you can't visually see during the winter time.
Is this Mel?
It is.
How come I can't see you, Mel?
I can't get my video to work. I tried to log out and log back in. It won't work, so sorry.
Do you have, let me ask you this, do you have a little flap over your camera?
No, I don't.
Okay. Because I did that once, and I'm like, my camera's not working, and I realized I had a little shutter on my camera. All right, to answer your question, how do we address those issues? I'm going to be honest with you, we don't. We can't. We can if there's a little bit of snow, but if there's a lot of snow, the grading, we can't. I mean, there's no way. The roof, and I just had a call yesterday, somebody trying to book an inspection with us, and they had the same question, and it happens all the time in winter. We try to take a little bit of the snow off to see what kind of condition the shingles are in, and get information from there. But we also can tell a lot from the age of the house. So for instance, excuse me, if you have a house that's 50 years old, how long, let me ask you this, because this is what I think every time I go to an inspection. And I'm trying to figure this out before we actually get to the inspection. When I go to a house and it's 50 years old, I know a composite shingle roof will last 20 to 25 years. So if the house is 50 years old, how many layers of shingles are going to be on that roof without even looking at it? I'm going to have 2, most likely, unless they tear off one layer before the last roof. And then I'm also going to know that the roof is going to be older because it's 50 years. I'm either going to see 2 layers with the roof being older, or I'm going to see 1 layer with the roof being newer. So I've had that in my brain going into it. And then when I go to the house, I take some snow and I remove the snow at the leading edge, and I can kind of get an idea of the condition of the shingles. But 100%, we cannot inspect the roof. I mean, it's just kind of a guesstimate from experience. However, we also provide a service free of charge that we will come back after the snow's melted to look at it if you want us to. So, but otherwise, the snow, the grading, it does definitely limit our view. There's no doubt about it. But we do the best we can. So I hope that answered your question, Mel.
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Guess what? Inspectors are not created equal. Did you know that? Here's a little clue. And it's not a I guess 100% safe clue, but if you ask what the home inspector's license number is, that'll kind of give you an idea of how long they've been an inspector. So there's a prefix number and there's a suffix number. Okay, the prefix number is the number of inspector they were when they got licensed. The suffix is 106. So every inspector will have a -106 after their number. But if I were to go get licensed right now, take the test and get licensed, I will probably be number like 3700-106. Make sense? My license number currently is 86. See what I'm saying? Kind of lets you know how long they've been in business. But again, nobody really asks you your number. These are the things that make home inspectors unequal or different, so to speak. Price, number one. You get what you pay for. What kind of value do they have? Is it just a home inspection? If you have a new home inspector who's done 10 inspections, guess what? He's going to be charging $200. Payment methods. How do they allow you to pay? Credit card, e-check, cash, check on site. Experience is number one. You pay for experience. It's the largest investment of most people's life. Why would you want a cut-rate home inspection company? It always perplexes me. Are they an alarmist? Are they a non-alarmist? Are they insured? Do they have E&O insurance if something were to go wrong? We have the E&O insurance, and if you refer us, any realtor refers us, our E&O insurance covers you as well on that transaction if something were to happen. So, because we know that when you refer someone, it's a risk. So we try to protect you as well. Are they professional? Do they come on site with a good appearance? Can they speak well? Do they answer the phone in a bar? Are there dogs barking in the background? Things like that. How easy are they to schedule? As far as I'm concerned, it should be almost simple, stupid to schedule. That's like KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. This is another big thing. How long have they been in the business? Do you know home inspectors come and go? They come and go. We've been in business 24 years. That's something to be said. Longevity and stability. That means if something goes wrong, guess what? We're not going to be out of business working at Home Depot. Report system. What type of report system do they have? Is it easy to read? Does it have pictures? Self-explanatory? A lot of different report systems out there. Are they available for questions? If you have a question after the inspection, or do they have to complete their entire day to get back to you, which now burns an entire day for you, the agent? Do they offer any warranties or extras with their inspections? Do they belong to any professional association, such as the Wisconsin Association of Home Inspectors, the American Society of Home Inspectors? InterNACHI is another one. Those are actually the main three. Do they give back to the community? You'll find that most home inspection companies do not give back to the community, much less the home inspection, or I should say the real estate industry. They're just there for your inspection, and that's it. Time on the inspection. Are they there for an hour? Are they there for 5 hours? That all is a big play as well. And do they offer other services, kind of a one-stop shop, so where they can get radon, mold, asbestos, lead, sewer scopes, air quality testing, pools, outbuildings? What can they all do for you? So that's just a few, I guess. Any questions on that? Are you finding this valuable?
This is good.
I hope so. All right. Enough about home inspection. Or I should say 101 as far as what home inspectors do and what they don't do. John wanted me to talk about the house, how it works, the basics of a home. We do a lot of inspections, and you'd be surprised how many agents have no idea what components are in a house. So hopefully this will be useful to you as well. These are the items we're going to cover. The roofs, the drainage systems, the grading, chimneys, the vents, the electrical, air conditioning, plumbing, fireplaces, attic, foundation, and drainage systems, and heating. If you have questions, just holler out, okay? But this is going to be pretty basic. This is for you, Cam. I'm just kidding. Cam wants to be a home inspector. And matter of fact, I can still put you on inspections if you want. I didn't forget our conversation, Cam. I can give you our number to Zach, or just call our office, and he'll make sure you get on some inspections if you want some experience, okay? We're there for you. So the basic components of a roof, we're going to talk about, or just point out certain things. The roof covering, if you see these particular items in an inspection report, this will help you identify what they are. The roof sheathing, the roof structure, the flashings, and the drainage systems. Everybody knows the drainage systems are the gutters, to make a real simple term. But a roof system design features such as shape, slope, layout, affects its ability to shed water. That's very important. And most water seepage issues in the basement are from gutter drainage, improper slopes, and so forth and so on. The roof covering is the shingles, okay? Basically the tile, the slate, whatever the shingle material may be. In this neck of the woods, we're mostly going to see composite shingle. Higher end homes, you're going to see tile, slate. If you go to Lake Drive, big houses like that. And you know what? Metal roofs are making a comeback. They're advertising the roof you'll never have to replace. So we do see a few of those as well. The sheathing basically is the boards or sheet metal that are underneath the roof covering. It's basically the wood that you can see in the attic. The roof structure that constructs is basically built up of rafters and trusses. Basically the building components in the attic that you can see. And then the flashings, these little guys probably cause the most problems, because when a roof leaks, most likely it's going to be in a flashing area. It's not going to be on a shingle. The flashing is basically the sheet metal that covers all the roof penetrations and keeps things watertight. So in a picture, you can see the flashings. Can you see my mouse? Everyone, or no?
Yes.
Okay. The flashings here, chimney flashings, this is a big area where leaks can happen. Not only should you be looking, or the inspector be looking at the exterior, but also 100% from the attic. I tell my guys that when you go into an attic, because sometimes houses are complicated, when you go into the attic, always keep in mind where that chimney's at, because that is one spot you do not want to miss looking at, okay? And if you can't look at it because of access, you have to document that in the report that this is a non-accessible area. We could not inspect the chimney from the attic. The chimney, or skylights, we talked about skylights. Skylights are always going to be a marginal component just because they leak. Unless some of them, there are some component skylights that are built as a one-piece unit and doesn't have the proper flashing, but it's a big area where home inspectors should be looking. The Fluke Cap, this is a very important part as well. That's why it's so important to get on that roof, if we can get on that roof. If we can't, we report it properly in the report, or we can use a drone. The shingles, that covers the top of the roof, well, basically the entire roof. In this case, we're looking at a composite type of shingle. The sheathing is the wood underneath, and the rafters or trusses are the framing that holds up the sheathing and the roof structure. There's ventilation. You can have it a gable vent here. They can have it as a ridge vent here, or at soffit vents underneath here. And then the the gutter system, these should have proper slope. All of the downspouts should be, the gutters should be sloped towards the downspout. And the downspout should be extended how far? 4 to 6 feet. 4 to 6 feet. If you do not have an extension on your downspout, That is the number one source for water to get in your basement, and it's so easy to fix. Yes.
If you have a dog that keeps ripping off your downspouts, warming the 4 to 6, like what do you suggest there?
You screw them in. I get a little self-tapping sheet metal screw, and you can just attach it to your drill, and you don't even need to have a pilot hole. Go right in. That's what I've done with mine.
Because my dog takes off my gutters daily, so.
Or get rid of the dog, and I don't think that's an option. Thank you, guys. All right, any questions about the roof, the structure, the anatomy of a roof? Again, this is just to get you to identify what certain components are. All right. Grading. You're going to hear this on every single home inspection you go on. Grading, grading, grading. And you know what? Most houses have bad grading. It's that simple. Because most people do not correct the grading unless it's absolutely necessary, because it's kind of hard work. So in a good sense, the water that comes off your roof should drain to your gutters. If you don't have gutters, that's a problem in itself. A lot of garages don't have gutters. And then it should drain to your gutters, which then go to your downspouts and extend away from the home. The water that gets through that system should go to the positive grading that flows away from the house. So for every 1 foot away from the house, the grading should go down about 1 inch. And if you can extend that 4 to 6 feet away, that's ideal. In reality, and I explain it this way exactly on an inspection, in reality, you're not going to get that. You're going to find neutral grading, or even worse, negative grading. And negative grading is bad. It's going to direct water to your house, and ultimately it'll end up in your basement over time. And that can fix half the water issues that are in your basement. It's very simple. Positive grading around the house, no matter whether it be concrete, a patio, a deck. A lot of people will build a deck, and the deck will be pitched towards the house. That's a no-no. Anything. It should be, in a perfect world, away from the home. Make sense? That's as basic as you can get. But it'll come up on every inspection, and it should be presented to your client as a maintenance issue, unless it is actually currently causing water seepage in the basement. Okay? If they were not to buy the house because of grading issues, guess what? They're going to find it on the next house too. All right, chimneys and vents. The chimney function is to produce the draft that draws combustion air from the appliance, and that could be a water heater, it could be a furnace, it can be a fireplace, okay, and safely exhaust the combustion gases to the outside. So if you look at this picture here, you can see you have a fireplace. It goes up and out. That's exactly what we want. This is your exhaust fan. It's a vent for maybe your kitchen. This is your water heater. It goes up and out as well. And this could be maybe a space heater that has a vent out the side. But to show you in reality, this is a fireplace chimney. And I'm going to be honest with you. A chimney that's exposed to the exterior like this, you see how it's on the side, usually has drafting issues because it's cold. When you start a fire, this flue inside here is cold, and it actually it may draft improperly until the flue itself warms up. So we let people know that. Now, if the chimney is in the middle of the house, you know, it's already warm. It has less issues. Another issue with fireplaces is, have you ever seen a fireplace in the basement? A natural fireplace of a house? More times than not, that'll have drafting issues as well, because it has a long way to go before it gets out of the house. Most basement fireplaces have drafting issues, and that should be discussed with a fireplace professional, or consult the owner to ensure that there's no issues with it. Now, I'm not talking a gas sealed unit. I'm talking about a natural fireplace. And then this is a vent for your water heater and furnace put together. So there's different types of chimneys, but the main purpose of it is to dispose that combustion air to the outside, the gases, okay? Questions about that? Electrical exterior. There's different types of service drops. You have below grade, which is here. You have a below grade here. This is an above grade. The inspector has to report if it's below grade or above grade. That's part of the standard. When I do look at this particular exterior one that's above grade, I'll look at the wire connections here to see if they're deteriorated. I'm going to look at the flashings to make sure that things are not lifting and possibly causing leaks. It's interesting because when people, this is a very sensitive area here, because when people replace their roof, they do not replace this flashing. Why? Why do you think they do not replace it? Because they have to get an electrician to disconnect all of this to put a new flashing down. So that usually does not get replaced. And over time, it gets rusty, it starts lifting up from the roof, and it's a potential leak area. Underground electrical, pretty easy. If you have a rectangle one like this, usually could mean you have a 200 amp service. This means you might have a 200 amp service because the box sizes kind of indicate how many amps you're going to have. But a service drop above ground, below ground is connected to a meter box which calculates how much energy your home uses and communicates to the local power utility company. Definitely components we look at. Questions about that?
Actually, who's responsible for the mass and the electrical connection?
That's a great.
City or
That's a great connect.
where is that?
Great question. The general rule is, you see how these there's like a thick knot here. The general rule is from here on is the electrical company's responsibility. Here on down is yours.
Gotcha.
Interior electrical. The interior electrical power system is a network of electrical components deployed to supply, transfer, and use electrical power. So we have two-prong outlets. What do home inspectors say about two-prong outlets? They actually should be updated. It's recommended, okay? It's recommended because you simply don't have the ground. And what a lot of people do is to eliminate this, they'll just disconnect this, pull this out, and then add this. But this little ground button or ground terminal is not active. So then that's how we get open grounded outlets, which are a safety hazard. Because you have to run a ground for these outlets. Or you could, and I never ever see this, you could add this modern outlet like we have here, but you should also have a sticker on top of it that says no equipment ground. And that advertises that this ground is not working. But most people, these are inconvenienced because it doesn't fit modern living. But more importantly, it just doesn't have a ground, so it can be a safety hazard. These are safer. How about these? We see these all the time. That's why we tell sellers, or you should be telling your sellers, that on an inspection report, this is going to be a safety hazard. How do you eliminate that safety hazard? By just putting a cover on it. Just put a cover on it, and it's all good. What type of outlet is that? This one here. GFCI, ground fault circuit interrupter. Where are these outlets? Where should we see them?
Near water sources.
Near water sources. And they've actually been phased in at different times of the year. So what I mean by that is they started doing exterior outlets, and then they did bathroom outlets, and then garage outlets. And so they've kind of mandated them to come in at different times. Now, home inspectors, to be safe, we recommend them anywhere within 6 feet of water, okay? But does that mean if it doesn't have it, it's bad? Say, for instance, let me give you a scenario. I go into a bathroom, 1950s, and it's original all the way around, and it has one of these outlets in it, and it's wired correctly. What is the home inspector going to say? We're going to recommend that it be GFCI'd. Recommend, okay? Now I'll give you a different scenario. Bathroom, 1950s, has been completely updated. And I see these outlets here. Now what does the home inspector say? Now it's a safety hazard. I'm sorry, Greg?
It's not up to code. Is that what they would say?
No, we don't say code. Okay, that's just a dangerous word. And it's a dangerous word because you can't pick and choose where you're going to enforce code if you're going to enforce code. If you're going to enforce code in the bathroom, you got to enforce code everywhere. You got to be consistent in your report. You can't pick and choose. So home inspectors are not obligated to do code inspections. So we would count it, it's definitely not code, but we would say it's a safety hazard. And the difference between the two scenarios is one bathroom's been updated, which means the outlet should have been updated. Where the other one was grandfathered in because it was built with the house. That's the difference between recommending and calling it a safety hazard. I can't say that all home inspectors report that way, though. That's how we present it. Also in kitchens. If you go into a kitchen that's original, we're going to recommend that they be there. If you go into a kitchen that's been completely updated, it was naturally built in the 50s, and they don't have GFCIs, I'm going to mark it down as a safety hazard. I hope you can tell the difference. But here's another hair that home inspectors, it's kind of a pain in the butt. Home inspectors, per our standards, have to trip those outlets. We have to put our little tester in and we have to trip them. Hopefully we can find the reset button, just because some outlets look like this and are actually connected to a GFCI somewhere else in the house. And so we put our outlet tester in here, trip it, and it trips somewhere and we have to find it. And that's not always easy. Sometimes you spend 15, 20 minutes looking where to reset it. But per our standards, we have to trip those outlets to make sure these are working. Questions? All right. Electrical, main panel. The main circuit breaker panel is essentially a big switch. Click it on, click it off, right? That's how the power comes to the house. The circuit breaker box also houses other small sub switches that connect with specific areas of your home. These small switches are called breakers, and their function is to ensure electrical safety. Okay, they allow only so much power to go through that breaker. All right. How about these? Are these good? What's the home inspector going to say for these?
No fuses.
No fuses. I shouldn't say you won't, but you're going to have a hard time finding even an insurance company to insure the house with fuses. So right away, that has to be dealt with. So if you go into a house and you're representing your buyer, you can put that right into the offer, because no one's going to buy that house unless they're buying cash. No one's going to buy the house without having that taken care of. What's the minimal amount of electrical service going to a house these days? What do we want as a minimal, amp-wise?
100 amp.
100 amp. 150 and 200 are more ideal, but 100 amp is the minimal. Subpanels, what are their purpose? The primary purpose of an electrical subpanel is to provide you with additional electrical circuits. So we go here, see how you have all this room in this panel for more circuits? This one is actually completely full. How do you plug in more power? Well, you put in a subpanel, and that provides you more room. And more times than not, we find it installed wrong. The one big thing that we look for when it comes to subpanels is how are the neutrals connected and how are the grounds connected. I don't have a real close-up picture, but you can see the white wires here and the copper wires on this one bar. On a subpanel, they have to be on different bars. They cannot be on the same bar. And if we pull off a cover of a subpanel and see that, I know right away it's been installed by a do-it-yourselfer, and it should be looked at. We find that quite often. Now, there's really no way you're not going to go in there and take panels off to look at things, but that's one big thing that you'll see on inspection reports. Air conditioning. Central air conditioners circulating cold air through a system of supply and return ducts. Supply ducts and registers carry conditioned air to and from the air conditioner to the home. Now, this seems pretty trivial, but it's the next couple slides I have kind of show you the entire system, and I'm not sure everyone knows how the entire system works. That's why I have it here. But you have your exterior unit outside. Everybody, I'm sure, is familiar with that. The air conditioner, this is actually your compressor and probably the most expensive part of it, okay? All that air is running through ductwork, okay? These are your supply ducts, whether they be insulated or not. These are your return ducts that are bringing air back to the system. But what some people don't know is this is a split system, and this is only half of your air conditioner unit. Only half, okay? The other half is in here. So you see your furnace in the basement. This actually is in the attic, but furnace usually are in the basement. These are refrigerant lines that connect this system, which is your evaporator, to this system. Okay? So there's two parts. When somebody says an air conditioner is bad, which part is bad? If you replace one half, you don't necessarily have to replace the other half. Okay? Now the problem is, this is a big, we call it an A coil, but you can't see it. See how it's all housed in this plenum. So we can only look for signs of problems. And the signs that we see or look for are leaking, moisture, stains, rust. That can indicate that there's been an issue here. But at that point, unless it's actively leaking, it's pure speculation. It could be from past central air unit, past evaporator coils, or it could be from new systems. But it's something we point out. Your furnace is down here. It connects to your second half of your central air unit. Did that make sense? In a one picture shot, this is what it looks like. Compressor, evaporator coil. Refrigerant lines connect the two. Your furnace has a blower which blows the air, whether it's heating or cooling. Plumbing. We're looking here at supply lines. There's copper supply lines, there's plastic or PEX, there's galvanized supply lines. Galvanized supply lines last about 80 years. So if you got a house that's 80 years old, guess what? You know, if I was buying the house, I would anticipate, local repairs. that I'm going to be needing to do. Home inspector will look for past repairs. Obviously, this is a do-yourself repair. But newer homes all usually have plastic. Also, a thing to know about home inspectors is they do not operate any valves that are not normal operating valves. So shutoffs like this, they will not operate. Any reason why? If a valve hasn't been operated, I'm sorry?
They get stuck.
Well, not only that, but if a valve hasn't been operated for a long period of time and I operate it now, it could leak. It'll start dripping maybe. And sellers don't like that. Along with plumbing, we have gas lines. Okay, gas is considered plumbing. To identify some of the things you're going to see out there, you have black iron. Okay, that's this here. Then you have CSST. This is corrugated stainless steel tubing. It's flexible. You'll see a lot of it in newer construction. And then you have CSST track pipe. That's the black stuff. It's flexible, but it's black. The reason why I'm pointing these out is because if you have CSST plumbing for your gas, it should be grounded. And 9.9% of the times we look at a house that has CSST, it's not grounded. Matter of fact, my house right now has plumbing with CSST, and there is no ground on it. What does a ground look like? It should have a clamp like this with a wire, number 6 wire on it. And it connects this to this. Now, why do we need that? Well, this tubing has been known to actually pop, explode in the event of a lightning strike. So the grounding keeps that event controlled. But you're never going to see it, most likely. If I do see it, I actually get pretty excited on site. Now here, this pipe is a newer corrugated stainless steel that does not need to be bonded or grounded. Make sense? All right. Plumbing drains. You see all different types of drains. What's the purpose of a drain, of a trap?
Stop sewer gas.
Yes, that's it. You have sewer gases here. They want to come up here. But if there's water in here, it naturally seals this off. So sewer gas does not smell. This is it called an S-trap, and it's the wrong trap. We see these quite often. It's homeowner or do-it-yourself installations. A big, I guess, hint other than the S that you see there is that the plumbing goes down as opposed to this one going to a wall. But this has a tendency to siphon out that water, which then can cause gases to come up. I was actually inspecting a house in Washington State. And why I was doing that is because I was training home inspectors. And there was a house, if I can give you a little story real quick. We went there at 8 a.m. and the entire house smelled like rotten eggs. When you walked in the door, it hit you like a ton of bricks. And the homeowner was like, yeah, we have a little bit of a gas problem. And I'm like, wow. And what we found when we were looking at the home is that every drain in the house had this S-trap. And I took my gas meter, my multi-gas meter, and I stuck it down the drain of the sink, and it went crazy. This was a big issue in that home. So that's why home inspectors call it out. It's a potential safety hazard. But if you look, the P-traps do that well. Here's a P-trap, and even a P-trap is built in your toilet. So that's the reason for the P-trap. Now, there are also bigger pipes called drain, waste, and ventilation pipes. You see them in the basement. They can be cast iron. They can be plastic or PVC. The reason why we have these DWV pipes, as we call them, is because the best way I can explain it is you have a soda, okay, and you take a straw and you put it in the soda, and you put your finger over the straw, and then you lift the straw up. You'll see soda in that straw, right? As soon as you lift your thumb off, where does the soda go? It goes right down. That's the purpose of your drain, waste, and ventilation pipe. It facilitates proper drainage, and it penetrates the roof. So when the inspector is on the roof, he'll be looking at this flashing and the condition of that pipe as well. But this is kind of how the system works. All of your local drains is somehow, some way attached to that vent. Now, we have a couple other things that are plumbing as well. We have what they call sub pumps, right? Everybody's familiar with sub pumps. The water comes from outside, it goes into your drain tile, and it discharges in this crock. When it gets to a certain height, the pump turns on and discharges the water back outside. So the water comes from outside, it goes back outside. That's the way it should work. There should be no draining from sinks, bathtubs, or anything going in here. Okay? This is a miniature sub pump. This is if you have a wet bar in the basement that there's no local drains. And it actually can, the drain can fill up this little, I guess, bucket, so to speak. And there's a little pump in there that'll kick it up and push it out as well. It's a less expensive way to install something if there's no plumbing nearby. And then there's a sanitary crock. Okay? This does deal with sewer water. This is storm water, this is sewer water. And why would we have a sanitary crock? It's when your sewer line is higher than the floor. And I'll have a picture coming up to explain it a little better. But this sanitary crock should be sealed because it may smell. It should also have a check valve, a vent, and then a discharge tube that goes to your drain, or goes to your main drain pipes. So if you look at this picture, see how this pipe going to your main drain is higher than this plumbing down here? So somehow it has to be lifted up. And that's why we have a sanitary crock or a sewer ejection pump. Does that make sense? Otherwise, water's not going to fly up there. It has to be lifted. And a lot of people, if you have a septic tank or a sewer line that's high like this, you need it if you have lower plumbing in your basement. Some houses have it, some houses don't. But your inspector should be looking at both those items. And the water should not be mixing, okay? So what you should not be having your you should not be having your groundwater going into here where it discharges into your sewer, and you should not be having sewer water discharging here going on your front lawn. This is fresh water outside, storm water. This is sewer water. Then you have your wells. I mentioned earlier that home inspectors do not inspect wells, but there are pressure tanks that we do look at. Okay, the pressure tank is usually in the basement. It usually has a little gauge like this, and this will tell you what the pressure is. And this also is something that is evaluated. So when I turn on the water, this gauge should be slowly working its way down because I'm pulling water from this tank. Okay? When it gets to a certain point, it then triggers the pump to kick back on to replenish water back in the pressure tank. And if this doesn't work properly, the pump will turn on, which is buried underground. The pump will turn on every time there is a demand for water, whether it be at your bathtub whether it be at your sink, doesn't matter. Whenever you turn a faucet on, your pump will kick on. And that's not right because you'll burn out your pump. The pump should only kick on when it replenishes the pressure tank. And that should come on automatically. Different types of tanks. This is obviously a newer tank. This is an older galvanized tank. This one usually sweats because the water is cold. This one's kind of insulated and performs a little bit better than these older tanks. And much smaller, by the way. Questions? All right. This gives you a little bit of the scenario. This pressure tank is half filled with air, half filled with water. So when there's a demand for water, the water level goes down and then the pump kicks on to replenish it. Usually between 40 and 60 psi. These particular tanks do need servicing every now and then, depending on what type of pressure tank you have, because occasionally the water will absorb the entire air into the tank, which will then cause your pump to kick on every time there's a demand for water. And they call that waterlogging. That's something we look for. But that pump itself is buried underground. Fireplaces. A fireplace or hearth is a structure made of brick, stone, or metal designed to contain fire, obviously, right? So we have different types here. We have a gas sealed unit, usually something you just go to the wall and turn a switch on. We have a wood burner, and I'm going to tell you 90% of the wood burners we see out there are installed by the homeowner. They're all installed a little different. The recommendations for installation are usually a little different. This is something you always want to make sure permits were pulled for to make sure that the clearances are properly met. Then you have your natural fireplace here. A lot of times they're converted to gas as well. But this natural fireplace, you can tell it being natural, and it's a masonry fireplace because this is very, very heavy and it has its own footing to sit on. These are lighter and they call these prefabs. This is a prefab fireplace because it sits on wood. It does not have its own footing. You're all familiar with chimney cleanouts in the basement for a fireplace. This one would have one because it sits on its own foundation. This would not. Most fireplaces, by the way, before I switch slides, are dirty. Most people do not have them cleaned, and it's something that usually gets recommended on a home inspection to be cleaned and reevaluated because it's like looking at something with wallpaper on if the flue is covered with creosote. This is the anatomy of the fireplace. So when we look up, we can only see maybe a little bit right here. We open the damper up. It should have a hearth in case ashes fly out. The damper is operated by the home inspector as well. But again, this part of the chimney cannot be evaluated unless you get a phase 2 inspection. The attic. Attics are generally used for storage. Not in modern construction, they are not, because they don't have a floor. People can fall through. Though their main purpose is to help control temperatures in a house by providing a large mass of slow-moving air. You hear the M word out there. Mold, mold, mold. This is a big area where you can find that M word. And a lot of it has to do with having improper insulation, maybe not having enough, or having improper ventilation. Air should be coming in from the soffits and going out on top. That's a proper way to ventilate. If you take one of these away, say for instance a house that doesn't have soffit vents but it just has a ridge vent or top vents, it's like clapping with one hand. It just doesn't work. It just does not work. So definitely some stuff we do look at. If you have a finished finished attic, you can have baffles installed where the air can still circulate in the attic. Foundations, we have several different types out there. You have your poured, you have your block, brick, a very old home, and then you have really old homes for stone foundation. This type of foundation, I'm going to basically inform my client that you have to anticipate seasonal dampness and seepage. Most likely there's no drain tile or anything like that. Therefore, that's what comes with this type of house. Poured walls are probably the strongest and less problematic, so to speak. Block walls, there are a lot of block walls in this area and a lot of them that fail. Why do you think in this area we had a lot of block walls? We had a thing here called unions. Unions, keeping people busy, building foundations. Block walls take more labor. Brick foundations, we'll get into that, maybe 80, 100-year-old house, somewhere around there. But these are the foundations you'll see in this area. This we find problems with all the time. Then you have the foundation drainage systems. Remember we talked about grading? That's your first defense against water in your basement. The water that does get through this system will collect into the drain tile if your house has it. There's an exterior drain tile. There's an interior drain tile, and it's collected or connected with bleeders. So the water falls here, collects in this drain tile. And when I say tile, it's really not tile. It's just a diameter type tube that's perforated. Okay, that's newer stuff. If you have older stuff, it's made of concrete, and it allows water to collect in there, and then by gravity, it'll flow through the footing, through the bleeder, to the interior drain tile, and it'll either go to a sub pump or what they call a Palmer valve, which is this. You guys see Palmer valves out there? Palmer valves are a Milwaukee thing. So if you go up, say for instance, you go up to anywhere, La Crosse or something in Wisconsin, you're not going to find Palmer valves. All right. Before sub pumps were used, they mixed the storm water and the sanitary water. Okay, so this is actually a floor drain. So its sewer water can go down here, and then the water that goes through your system here can collect into your drain tile, and then through your Palmer valve, which mixes the two and then goes to the sewer. And nowadays, with all of the water flow, foundation-wise, heavy rains, they want to divide those. They want the water that comes from outside to go back outside, and they don't want to mix that with the sanitary sewer. So these are actually obsolete. They're grandfathered in until they break, and they break like crazy. More times than not, they're stuck closed, and the water that wants to get through here can't, and it'll build up into your basement around the perimeter. So this is something definitely that your home inspector will be looking at, and usually 50s, 60s is when you'll see them. 40s, 30s, I've even seen them in 20s, in the 1920s, 80, 90-year-old houses. So this is the modern system. This is the old system. And then if you have a really old house like this, it won't have any system. That all make sense? By the way, if this is stuck closed and a plumber were to go in there and break it off, it constitutes putting a sub pump in. You can't leave this without a valve, because if the sewer were to back up, it's going to collect in your drain tile and create more problems. That's the purpose of the Palmer valve. Protects it against sewer backups. So your home inspector should stick his nice clean arm and hand down here and make sure that works. But chances are it won't. So anticipate a repair.
Obviously, if you have a sump pump, You don't have to check it. You wouldn't bother checking it.
If you have a sub pump, you can't have both systems. You got to have one or the other. If you have a house that used to have a plumber valve and now has a sub pump, you're going to see a patch in the floor here because they have to seal this off. This has to be deactivated. If you have a house that was built with this, yeah, you're not going to see this at all. I had a house in West Dallas that had a plumber valve. The house is 1957, and I loved my plumber valve because it worked. It was a rarity that it worked, but it did work, and I didn't have to worry about my sub pump, turning off with the power and filling up and creating water moisture in my basement because this is just mechanical. There was no power, connected to it. All right, we're winding down here. Heating and cooling, we got different types of heating systems you'll see. Obviously, the electrical. When we see electrical added like this, we just recommend that you review the permits because some people do things themselves, and we can't see how they connected the wires or anything like that. We can just verify it's working. But I will tell you one thing. If you have an electrical heat source here, you shouldn't have an outlet above it. You have plug something in, that wire could burn. So this, if I see this, right away I know something's wrong. Homeowner put this in. Here's your forced air furnace, which we see in most cases. Up in here is where we see the A coil. Remember the refrigerant, the evaporator coil for the central air. Here's the furnace, forced air furnace that is called. And then we have boiler. This is hydronic heat. The drawback with a boiler is you can't have air conditioning. You'll have to have window units or something like that, unless you have the ductwork run for the air conditioning. Boilers last about 30 years, and furnaces last between 15 and 20. Boilers usually cost twice as much to put in as a forced air furnace. If you have a question out there, please do not hesitate to ask. We're here to help you and to make you successful and to look like a rock star. So please do not hesitate for any reason. Okay? Well, I hope this was helpful to you, and I will hand it over to John.